Welcome to Chapter 3, Sales and Customers, Part 1. In this chapter, the students will learn the fundamental parts of working with customers and making sales. This is an important element for any business as they start to use QuickBooks. The objectives for this chapter include the following. We would like the students to learn how to set up a customer, set up a service item for sale, set up a non-inventory part for sale, and how to work with the sales workflows, including the sales receipts workflow and invoices. Before making sales, there are two setup steps. First, the students will learn how to create customers. Creating customers helps make completing forms easy and efficient. Instead of having to create a customer from scratch for every sale, you simply choose the customer from the list. After choosing the customer, their contact information will display on the sales form. Setting up customers is an important first step before making sales. To create a new customer, click the Sales link on the navigation bar. QuickBooks displays the Sales page that includes 4 tabs. The tabs are at the top, and they include All Sales, Invoices, Customers, and Products and Services. Click Customers, and then click New Customer. The student will complete this information on this page to set up the new customer. There are several important fields to take note of as you enter the information. First, enter the customer's first and last name for an individual. QuickBooks lets you choose how to display the names in the list, so these are important fields when adding a new customer. Next, if the customer is a business, add a company name. After entering the name information, QuickBooks lets you choose the naming convention that you want to display in the list. Click the Display Name As drop-down and choose a naming convention that works for you. It's a good idea for your students to choose this convention and stick with it. This makes the customer list organized and easy to use. It also makes it easy for you as the instructor to find the information you need in the company files. Next, enter the billing address in the appropriate fields, including the street address, the city, the province, and postal code. Next, enter the email address of the customer. This is important if you are going to be emailing forms to the customer, such as sales, estimates, and invoices. Enter the phone and other contact information, including mobile and fax, if necessary. You can also include an other form of contact on the customer's website. This information is just for use in the customer window. Next, choose if you want to add a shipping address. Choose the option to use the billing address or deselect to enter a unique address. You'll see that on the left-hand side of the window there are 4 additional tabs. Click Notes to add any notes about this customer. This is helpful if you want to keep track of any interactions you have with the customer or track any other details that apply. Click Tax Info. The tax info contains only one field, and that's the tax registration number. This is used if you'd like to keep track of the customer's tax number, such as their GST or HST number. This will not be used in this class. Next, click Payment and Billing. There are 5 fields in this window. First, choose the preferred payment method. This tells QuickBooks how the customer would like to pay. After choosing the preferred payment method, this information will display when you receive a payment from the customer, making it a little bit faster when doing certain transactions in QuickBooks. Next, choose the preferred delivery method. This lets you tell QuickBooks if you're going to print a form for the customer, like an invoice or a sales receipt, or send it later via email. Terms can also be added to the customer record. Clicking Terms will display 4 different options. Choose the one that applies to this specific customer. When choosing Net 30, you're telling QuickBooks that their due date will be 30 days from the transaction date. After choosing a term for a customer, it automatically displays on their invoice. However, please note that as of right now, creating and adding a term does not automatically calculate an early payment discount for the customer. The next field you see is the opening balance. This is an important field when you're starting up QuickBooks for the first time. However, as the instructor, I would encourage your students not to use this opening balance field. When this field is used, QuickBooks will do an offsetting entry to the opening balance equity account. This may be confusing for the students and sometimes difficult for you to figure out what entries were made to the account. It's strongly recommended that you don't use the opening balance field when teaching students how to set up customers. The next option is "This customer pays me with." This option allows you to use multiple currencies in QuickBooks. This would only be used if the customer was a foreign customer and paid in a foreign currency. Leave the currency as Canadian dollar for all examples in this class. Finally, the Attachments tab. This tab lets you upload any attachment to the customer record. This can be used to save contracts, photos, or any other files that are relevant to the customer. After entering all the customer information, click Save, and QuickBooks adds this customer to your customer list. Next, we'll learn how to create products and services. The products and services list make filling out forms easy, letting you choose from a list of services instead of having to create each one individually from scratch. Before making sales to customers, you must also add products and services to the company. To add products and services, click Sales, and then click Products and Services. The products and services list includes all inventory parts, non-inventory parts, service items, and bundles. We'll talk about some of these types of items in a future chapter, including inventory part and bundles. In this example, we're going to set up a service. Before setting up the service item, let's review the components of the products and services list. At the top of the list, you see two icons, one indicating low stock, the other out of stock. These icons are directly related to inventory, so we'll review these in a future chapter. The first column is the service name. This is the name of the service your company provides. You can add images of the products and services that will display next to the company name. Next, you see the type of the item that describes the type of product or service in your list. This is where the label Service will display. Next, you see Sales Description. This is a sales description that displays on the customer's sales transaction, like an invoice or sales receipt. Likewise, for the sales price, this information will display on the customer's sales transaction. You can edit what displays on this list by clicking the gear icon in the top right corner of the list. Deselect the items that you don't want to see, or add columns if required. Now let's set up a service item. Click New to add a new service. QuickBooks displays the four different types of items as discussed earlier. Choose Service. In this window, you're required to enter several pieces of information. First, enter the name of the service. In this example, you can ignore both the SKU and category, as these will be used primarily for inventory parts. Next, enter the sales information. In this example, we'll add a description. However, this is an optional field. If the description is not consistent, you can leave this field blank and add the description as needed on each sales form. Next, we'll add a sales price. Once again, this is an optional field. If the price changes, leave this field blank. The most important step when setting up the service is to choose the correct income account. This tells QuickBooks which account to credit when you make a sale of the service. This is important for the students to learn, as this income account is what represents the debits and credits behind the scenes when they create a sales transaction. As an instructor, you may notice errors being made here as students learn the concepts of setting up products and services. Ensuring this field is correct will be critical to the student's success in making sales. In this example, I'll choose the sales account. Lastly, choose the sales tax rate for the service. When you choose this, QuickBooks knows what sales tax to charge when selling the service. This is important to help the students automate the addition of taxes. Choose the appropriate sales tax for your location. These are all the required fields for this particular service item setup. After completing all of the information, click Save and Close, and QuickBooks adds the service to your products and services list. In addition to creating services in QuickBooks, you can also create non-inventory parts. A non-inventory part is one of the types of line items you can use when you're filling out an invoice or sales receipt. Use the non-inventory part to track merchandise for things like items that you purchase but you do not resell, items you sell but do not purchase, or items that you might purchase and resell but do not stock in inventory or track as inventory. The non-inventory part is often used to track supplies or materials that get used in providing a service or product in your business. To create a non-inventory part, click the gear icon and then click Products and Services. Click New. Select the type Non-Inventory. Enter the name and SKU. The SKU stands for Stock Keeping Unit. This is optional and will most likely not be used. You can also choose a category. This is also an optional field. Next, enter a description to display on sales forms. Then enter the sales price. Select the appropriate income account to track revenue for this product. Typically, like the other services, this will be the sales account. Choose the tax rate. Finally, after entering all of the information, click Save and Close to complete the non-inventory part setup. After these two setup steps are complete, you're ready to make sales in QuickBooks. There are two workflows that we'll discuss in further detail in this chapter. The first is when you create invoices for customers for when they will pay later. The second workflow is a sales receipt for when the customer pays at the time of the sale. There are two main workflows to enter sales in QuickBooks Online. Which one you choose depends on whether your customer is paying you now or if they pay later. If your customers don't pay you in full at the time you provide your service or product, or if they pay in advance, you need to track how much they owe you. Entering an invoice for each customer helps you track what your customers owe you at any given time, or what you will have learned called the accounts receivable. If your customer pays in full at the time they receive your service or product, then you don't have to track how much they owe you. There will be no accounts receivable in this case. In this example, you'll use a sales receipt. The sales receipt will be used when the customer pays at the time of the sale. The accounts receivable process, or invoicing, requires 3 steps. First, you'll create the invoice for the customer. This makes an entry to the accounts receivable. Next, when your customer pays, you'll receive the customer payment. Finally, you'll make a deposit of the customer payment. Alternatively, when the customer pays you at the time of the sale, you'll use the sales receipt form. This workflow includes 2 steps. First, you create the sales receipt, and then you make the deposit of the customer payment. These are the 2 primary workflows for making sales in QuickBooks. In QuickBooks, an invoice is a form on which you record details about a sale to a customer who owes you money. It lists the services you're providing or the products you're selling. It also shows the quantity and price or rate of each item. If you need to make automatic adjustments to prices, invoices will work for you. Click the Create menu and click Invoice to get started. Click the Customer drop-down and select the customer name. Enter the date of the sale. Edit the invoice number if necessary. In this case, QuickBooks will count up sequentially for you. When first getting started, it's important to note that the invoice numbering system will start at 1,000 and go up from there. If your students are having problems with invoice numbers, ensure that they start at a particular number and QuickBooks will begin counting from that point. In the product or service area of the form, select the appropriate products and/or services for sale. This will be the crucial part to doing the accounting behind the scenes for an invoice. Add any other products and services for sale as needed. Note, any description and price can be edited on the invoice form. You are not required to use the price from the products and services list. Likewise, you can edit the description to match whatever you're selling at the time. After adding the products and services, add the appropriate sales tax for each item. At the bottom of the form, you'll note several additional fields. These fields are optional. You can add a customer message for the customer. This will display on the customer's form. You can also add a statement memo. This will only display on the customer's statement printed at a later time. The Attachments option lets you attach a document to this QuickBooks invoice. This can be used for whatever purpose you determine. For example, if you had a contract that coincided with this invoice, you could attach the contract and it can be emailed and attached to this document in QuickBooks. After completing all of the required fields, save the invoice. Note, you can click Print or Preview to review and print an invoice directly from the invoice form. You can also email an invoice to a customer when you click Save and Send. When you receive payments, use a payment item on an invoice or enter a sales receipt, QuickBooks knows you've received money. When you record each payment, you can choose how you want QuickBooks to handle the deposit. You can do one of the following. First, use the undeposited funds account. The undeposited funds account acts as a holding account similar to holding money in a drawer until you make a deposit at your financial institution. For example, if you receive a check from a customer on a Monday but don't go to the bank until Friday, you'll deposit and hold the money in the undeposited funds account. This is strongly recommended for students to deposit items to this account, as it will mimic what happens in a real business situation. If the payment will not be deposited with other payments, you can use the Deposit To option to deposit the payment directly to a QuickBooks bank account. If you choose this option, funds are transferred immediately to the bank account. The funds do not appear in the undeposited funds account and do not need to be deposited using the bank deposit window. After creating invoices, you will wait for the customers to pay. When a customer pays and the payment is received, do the following. First, click the Create menu and select Receive Payment. Click the Customer drop-down and choose the customer name. A list of invoices outstanding will display for you. Select the invoices to receive payment against. Enter the amount of the payment if it does not match the amount of the invoice or invoices being paid. Note, the customer can make partial payments. After making a partial payment, the outstanding amounts will remain in the accounts receivable for the customer until paid in full. Next, select the payment method. Then enter a reference number if applicable. Next, select the appropriate Deposit To account. In this case, choose Undeposited Funds. Finally, after completing the information, click to save the customer payment. To deposit any payments from customers, click the Create menu and then select Bank Deposit. Select the appropriate Deposit To account. Usually this will be a bank account. Any undeposited payments in the Undeposited Funds account will display. Select each of the payments to be deposited. Note that this is the way that you'll match the deposit amounts in QuickBooks to the actual deposit amounts that will display on the business bank statement. This is helpful when doing account reconciliations later on in this course. After selecting all of the appropriate payments to deposit, click to save the deposit. Sales Receipt Workflow. Use the sales receipt workflow when your customer pays you at the time of the sale. Because there is no accounts receivable, the customer name is optional in this case. Another word for sales receipt would be cash sales. This is often used in retail, hotels, bars, and other cash-based businesses. To create a sales receipt, click the Create menu and then click Sales Receipt. Choose a customer name if necessary. In the Product Service area of the form, select the appropriate products and/or services for sale. Like any other sales transaction, enter the rate and sales tax if necessary. In this case, you're receiving the payment at the time of the sale, so you have to fill in the payment information in the middle part of the form. Enter the payment method and then enter the reference number if applicable. For example, if your customer paid you with a check, you could enter the check number. This is a searchable field and will help you find this transaction at a later time if necessary. Next, select the appropriate Deposit To account. In this example, choose Undeposited Funds, as discussed earlier. Finally, click Save to complete the transaction. After completing the sales receipt, you can make the deposit as needed. Sales and Customer Reports. There are several preset reports to help you understand the sales and accounts receivable in your business. Choose from the following reports that provide the information you need. The first report is a Sales by Customer detail. This report shows the total sales to each customer and sub-customer, broken down by transaction. It includes income from all products and services recorded on an invoice or sales receipt. It does not include income tax from sales tax or reimbursed expenses. To create this report, click Reports, and then click All Reports. Click Review Sales, and then click Sales by Customer Detail. The second report is the AR Aging Summary. This report summarizes the status of unpaid invoices in the accounts receivable. For each customer who owes you money, the report shows the following. First, it shows what the customer owes for the current billing period. Then it shows you what the customer hasn't paid from previous billing periods, and a subtotal for each job balance if there are sub-customers in the company. To create this report, click Reports and then click All Reports. Click Manage Accounts Receivable, and then click AR Aging Summary. To see a list of the transactions that make up a balance on any report, click the amount. The third report is the Open Invoice Report. This displays all unpaid invoices. If you're already in the Report Center, click Manage Accounts Receivable, and then click Open Invoices. QuickBooks displays the report with all unpaid invoices in the company.